If you are over 60, I must warn you. The very drink you may be sipping every morning could be silently loading your brain with the seeds of deadly blood clots. I say this not to scare you, but because I have seen too many seniors brought into the hospital gasping for air, paralyzed on one side of their body, or never waking up again. All because of something so ordinary, so innocent-looking, that it hides its danger in plain sight. For decades, as a brain doctor, I have sat across from grieving families asking me how their mother, father, or spouse could be gone so suddenly. And too often, when I trace the clues backward, I find one simple pattern. The ritual morning drink that seemed harmless, even healthy, was actually a trigger for thickening blood, constricting vessels, and feeding the exact conditions that create clots in the brain. Imagine this. Your blood is supposed to flow like a smooth river, carrying oxygen and life to every corner of your body. But certain triggers, especially what you swallow first thing in the morning, can turn that smooth river into a sticky, turbulent stream. The red cells begin to clump, tiny platelets start sticking together, and suddenly, inside your skull, a clot forms like a dam blocking a vital waterway. Within minutes, parts of your brain are starved of oxygen, and the result can be slurred speech, drooping on one side of the face, loss of vision, or even instant collapse. Let me tell you about George, a 71-year-old retired teacher. Every morning, without fail, he drank the same steaming cup as part of his routine. He believed it kept him sharp and alert, ready for his crossword puzzles. But one morning, as he lifted the pen to his paper, his hand froze mid-air. His wife, Mary, heard him call out, but the words were twisted, incomprehensible. By the time she called the ambulance, George's brain was already being suffocated by a clot. He survived, but half his body never moved the same again. When I reviewed his case, I was not shocked at all. His morning drink was thickening his blood at the exact hour the body is already at its highest risk for clotting. You see, the morning hours are already the most dangerous time for seniors. When you wake up, your blood is naturally more concentrated because you've gone all night without water. Your vessels are tighter, your pressure spikes, and your heart works harder to push that thicker blood through narrow channels. Now, imagine pouring a drink into your system that supercharges this dangerous state. One that dehydrates you further, stimulates a surge of stress hormones, and tightens vessels like a vice. That is exactly what so many seniors unknowingly do at breakfast. And the tragedy is this. It's not an exotic or rare substance. It's sitting in millions of kitchens, served in cafes, advertised as a comfort, a pick-me-up, even a healthy way to start the day. Yet in the brains of seniors, it can act like a time bomb. I remember another patient, Helen, 68 years old, who came in one morning after collapsing at her church. She was a vibrant woman, active in her community, always smiling. She told me, through tears, that all she had done was drink her usual morning cup before heading out. But as she sat down in the pew, her vision blurred and her arms slipped lifeless from her lap. The clot was massive, cutting off blood flow to a third of her brain. She looked at me in disbelief when I explained how her very routine, one she thought was harmless, had been priming her blood vessels for disaster. The science is clear. This morning drink dehydrates your body when you are already at your driest. It spikes your blood pressure at the very moment your heart is most vulnerable. It forces your platelets into a sticky frenzy, clumping together in ways that set the stage for blockage. And once a clot forms in the brain, the clock starts ticking fast. Brain cells die at the rate of millions per minute. Some never recover. Some take away speech, memory, independence, forever. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard the same words from patients or their families. But doctor, it's just coffee. Everyone drinks it. That's the heartbreaking truth. Coffee, especially strong black coffee on an empty stomach, is one of the most dangerous ways a senior can start the day. It is not just the caffeine, though that alone is a powerful constrictor of blood vessels in the brain. It is also the dehydration, the blood pressure surge, and the way it interacts with already fragile vessels hardened by age, cholesterol, and years of silent buildup. Now, I know some people will want to argue, but coffee has antioxidants. I read it's good for the heart. And yes, in younger, healthier bodies, in moderation, it can have some protective effects. But after 60, your brain is not the same. Your vessels are narrower. Your blood is stickier. Your heart is weaker. What was once harmless can become deadly. Let me paint a picture inside your body. You wake up, your heart already pumping harder because your blood is thick like syrup. You take that first sip of hot coffee. Within minutes, caffeine surges into your bloodstream, causing your adrenal glands to fire stress hormones. Your vessels tighten, your pressure spikes, your kidneys push out even more water, and your blood grows thicker still. Then, as you stand up and start your day, that thickened blood is forced through fragile, narrowed brain arteries. Suddenly, a small clot catches on a rough patch of vessel wall, and like a snowball rolling downhill, it grows until it stops blood flow entirely. You feel dizzy, your words slur, your vision fades, and your life is changed forever. This is not theory. This is what I see in the ER, again and again, every single week. Seniors who thought they were simply following a harmless ritual, suddenly robbed of speech, movement, and independence. Families who thought their loved one was safe, suddenly planning for wheelchairs, feeding tubes, or funerals. And the cruelest part? It happens so quickly. One morning, everything feels normal. By afternoon, your life is never the same again. When I walk into a hospital room and see a senior lying motionless, a breathing tube in their throat, monitors beeping, family members clutching each other in disbelief, the first thing I ask myself is, what was the trigger? What pushed this fragile balance over the edge? And more often than you would believe, the answer is waiting in the small details of the morning routine. A steaming cup that was supposed to wake them up, but instead sent their blood vessels into chaos. The brain is the hungriest organ in your body. Even though it makes up only a fraction of your weight, it demands a constant flood of oxygen and nutrients carried by blood. The tiniest pause in that flow, even seconds, begins to suffocate your neurons. And here is the terrifying part. Clots do not give warnings. They build quietly, they strike suddenly, and by the time you feel the first sign, enormous damage has already begun. I recall treating Thomas, 74 years old, a retired firefighter. He was strong, proud, and still carried himself with the posture of a man used to saving others. His wife told me that every morning he drank 2 mugs of strong black coffee before stepping outside for his walk. One morning, as he tied his shoes, he suddenly collapsed, his face twisting in a way his wife had never seen. By the time he arrived at our hospital, the clot in his middle cerebral artery had already destroyed much of his speech center. He looked at me with tears streaming down his face, unable to form the words he wanted to speak. A man who had shouted orders in burning buildings now could not even ask for water. I tell you this because it is not rare. Seniors like Thomas, who believed they were simply keeping up with their daily ritual, walk into disaster one sip at a time. The medical science supports what I have witnessed. Coffee, especially on an empty stomach, thickens the blood, spikes adrenaline, and makes vessels seize up like rusted pipes under sudden pressure. The body of a 30-year-old may recover quickly, but at 60, 70, 80, those vessels are fragile, narrowed, and brittle. They cannot handle the sudden storm. Your body in the morning is already in a dangerous state. Cortisol, your stress hormone, surges at dawn. Your blood pressure naturally rises as part of waking up. This is why more strokes and heart attacks happen between 6 a.m. and noon than at any other time of day. And into this storm, millions of seniors pour gasoline, a mug of coffee. The heat, the caffeine, the dehydration, all colliding with your vulnerable vessels. I remember another case, Martha, 69 years old. She was an energetic grandmother, always baking cookies, running after her grandchildren, laughing with friends. She came to me terrified after a terrifying episode. Her right arm suddenly went weak while holding her grandchild. She dropped the child, thankfully onto a couch, but she herself slumped to the floor, unable to move her hand. It lasted only 10 minutes, then disappeared completely. This was a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke, a warning shot from her brain that the next one could be permanent. And when we went through her habits, I found the same culprit. Every morning she skipped breakfast, but downed 2 cups of coffee before doing anything else. She thought it was harmless. In truth, it was pushing her blood into a state where clots could form at any moment. The deceptive part of this drink is that it feels good. You feel more awake, sharper, even energized. But what you cannot feel is the thickening of your blood, the constriction of your vessels, the way your platelets are becoming stickier by the second. You cannot feel the tiny clots forming in silence, waiting for the wrong moment to lodge themselves in a vessel that feeds your brain. And when they do, there is no undo button. As a brain doctor, I must tell you something very clearly. Once brain tissue dies, it does not come back. We can treat, we can support, we can help you recover partially, but we cannot bring back the cells lost to a clot. They are gone forever. That is why prevention is everything. And prevention starts with recognizing the hidden dangers in what you consume each day. Now, you may wonder, Doctor, I've been drinking coffee my whole life, and I feel fine. But let me remind you, stroke and clotting risks do not explode overnight. They build quietly over years of narrowed arteries, hardened vessel walls, silent high blood pressure, and sluggish circulation. You may feel fine, until one day you are not. Until one day a clot forms, and you cannot move your arm, cannot say your name, cannot recognize your own children. That is the cruel reality I have seen far too many times. Think of your brain as a delicate garden. Blood flow is the water that keeps it alive. When that flow is smooth and steady, the flowers bloom. But coffee, poured into a senior's morning routine, is like cutting off the irrigation at the hottest moment of the day. The soil dries, the flowers wilt, and one by one, the garden withers. Except in this case, it is not flowers you lose, it is memory, speech, independence, life itself. And let us not forget the added dangers coffee brings to seniors already on medications. Blood pressure pills, blood thinners, diabetes drugs, all of these can be disrupted by caffeine's unpredictable effects. I have seen seniors whose morning cup sent their blood pressure soaring despite their medication. I have seen others whose rhythm of the heart was thrown into chaos, beating wildly, creating the perfect environment for clots to form and shoot straight to the brain. The saddest truth is that many seniors do not connect the dots. They believe their weakness, their dizziness, their palpitations are just old age. But so often, it is the result of what they swallowed just hours before. And unless someone like me tells them plainly, they keep repeating the same mistake until the day disaster strikes. Coffee is not a harmless ritual. For a senior brain, it can be the fuse to a ticking time bomb. I often tell my patients that what you do first thing in the morning can decide whether your brain thrives or collapses. For seniors, the brain is already walking a tightrope. Years of wear and tear, silent high blood pressure, hidden cholesterol buildup, and slower circulation mean the margin for error is razor thin. And yet, right at the most fragile moment, millions choose to flood their system with the very substance that pushes them over the edge. You may not realize how vulnerable your brain truly is after 60. The walls of your arteries, once flexible and smooth, are often stiff and scarred from decades of pressure and fatty deposits. Blood, which should flow like clear water, now moves thicker, heavier, more sluggish. The heart, once powerful, now pumps with effort, straining to push against resistance. In this setting, every sip of a dehydrating, vessel-tightening drink is like whipping a tired horse. It may run a little faster for a moment, but the collapse comes sooner and harder. I will never forget Eleanor, 72 years old, who came into my care after a massive clot left her completely paralyzed on the left side of her body. Before that morning, she was independent, driving her own car, visiting her friends, tending her garden. She woke at 7 a.m., as she always did, and reached for her ritual mug of strong coffee. By 7:30, as she stood at her kitchen counter, her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor. Her daughter found her an hour later, unable to speak, her eyes pleading for help she could not put into words. The clot had choked off blood to her brain's language center. When I sat with her family, her daughter whispered through tears, "But doctor, she just had her morning coffee like always." This is the cruel deception. The habit feels safe because you have repeated it for years, but as your body changes with age, what was once tolerated becomes dangerous. The morning cup that once gave you a boost in your 40s or 50s can be the very spark that triggers catastrophe in your 70s. The medical science explains why. Caffeine, the powerful drug inside coffee, does not simply wake you up. It acts directly on your nervous system, flooding it with stress signals. Your adrenal glands release adrenaline, your heart beats faster, your vessels constrict like clamps, and your kidneys begin pulling water out of your blood. For a younger person with healthy vessels, the body adapts. But for seniors with arteries already narrowed, with blood already thick from overnight dehydration, this sudden storm can be lethal. A clot forms. A vessel bursts. A life changes in an instant. And remember, coffee is not just about caffeine. The oils inside it, called cafestol and kawul, raise cholesterol over time, further hardening your arteries. The acidity irritates the lining of your stomach, which in turn worsens inflammation in your whole body. That inflammation makes clots more likely to form and stick. You may not feel this happening, but I see the results every week. Strokes, heart attacks, clots in the lungs, all tracing back to habits people thought were normal. Let me share the story of Robert, 67, who came in with what seemed like simple dizziness. He had felt lightheaded after his usual 3 cups of coffee that morning, but shrugged it off. When he stood to answer the phone, he collapsed. A scan of his brain revealed multiple small clots. Not one large stroke, but several mini-strokes scattered across different areas. His memory was fragmented, his coordination poor. When I asked about his daily routine, he admitted proudly that he'd been a coffee lover his entire life. His pride turned to horror as I explained how each cup had been adding fuel to the fire inside his vessels. And here is something most seniors don't realize. Strokes are not always massive, dramatic events. They can be small, silent, creeping in like thieves. A little forgetfulness here, a stumble there, a slurred word you laugh off. These are not just normal aging. They can be tiny clots, starving bits of your brain. Each one leaves behind scar tissue, invisible but permanent, until one day the damage adds up and you find yourself in a nursing home, unable to recognize your own family. And that morning coffee ritual can accelerate this silent destruction. Now, some will argue, "Doctor, I drink decaf, so I'm safe." But even decaf coffee carries risk. It still dehydrates, it still contains artery-irritating oils, and it still pushes your body into imbalance when you are most fragile in the morning. I have treated patients who thought decaf protected them, until they arrived in my ER with the same slurred speech, the same drooping face, the same paralyzed limbs. The tragic irony is that seniors drink coffee because they believe it helps them function. They feel more awake, more capable, more themselves. But what they do not see is how much it steals from them behind the scenes, how it primes their body for the very conditions that can strip away independence, speech, and memory forever. I sit across from patients and I see the fear in their eyes when they realize the truth. They ask me, "Doctor, if I stop now, can I still save my brain?" And I tell them, "Yes, but only if you act before the clot forms. Prevention is powerful. Change can save you. But once the stroke happens, there is no going back. No drug, no surgery, no therapy can restore a brain cell that has died. That is why you must understand the danger now, before it is too late. Think of your morning drink not as comfort, but as a loaded gun. You may get away with handling it once, twice, even 1,000 times. But all it takes is one misfire, one clot, one blocked artery, and everything changes forever. This is not exaggeration. This is the daily reality of hospitals around the world. Seniors who woke up believing it was just another ordinary morning, sipping their usual coffee, only to be wheeled into an emergency room hours later, their lives broken in half by a clot that did not care about routine. And here is the most painful truth. It could have been prevented. I must be brutally honest with you. I have watched too many seniors lose everything because they underestimated the power of one cup. A stroke is not just a medical event. It is a thief. It robs you of your independence, your dignity, your ability to live the life you once knew. And what makes it unbearable is knowing that it could have been avoided if only someone had warned them about the danger hiding in their morning drink. Let me take you inside the brain when this tragedy unfolds. Imagine the blood vessel as a fragile straw, delivering life-giving blood to your neurons. In a senior, that straw is already narrowed, its walls hardened and roughened by decades of silent buildup. Now, picture the thickened blood, dehydrated overnight, surging through with extra force because of caffeine's pressure-raising effect. The vessel constricts like a squeezed garden hose. Inside, platelets start sticking to each other, forming a lump. Suddenly, that lump lodges itself against the vessel wall, sealing it shut like cement. In an instant, the river of blood that should be nourishing part of your brain dries up completely. Within minutes, millions of cells suffocate, sending waves of chaos through your body. I remember Patricia, 70 years old, a retired nurse. Ironically, she had spent her career caring for stroke patients, warning them about lifestyle choices. Yet she never questioned her own morning ritual of coffee. One morning, while on the phone with her granddaughter, her voice suddenly slurred. She tried to speak, but the words tangled into nonsense. Her granddaughter screamed for her mother, who rushed to the house. By the time she reached the hospital, the clot had destroyed the area controlling her speech. Patricia, who had comforted countless patients with her voice, could no longer form a single sentence. Her tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she realized what had happened. She whispered to me with great effort, "I didn't know. I thought it was safe." And that is the tragedy. Millions of seniors simply do not know. They are told coffee is harmless, even healthy. They read headlines about antioxidants, about memory boosts, about reduced risks of certain diseases. But what those headlines forget to mention is the critical difference: age. A body in its 20s, 30s, even 40s can tolerate these effects. But once past 60, the body changes dramatically. The vessels harden, the blood thickens more easily, and the balance tips toward clotting. What was once neutral or mildly beneficial becomes a ticking time bomb. I must emphasize another cruel reality. Strokes caused by morning clots are often the most devastating. Why? Because they strike at the very hours when blood is thickest and vessels are most constricted. This means the clots that form are larger, the blockages more complete, the damage more severe. It is no accident that hospitals see their busiest stroke hours between dawn and noon. And for coffee drinkers, this window becomes even deadlier. Let me tell you about Joseph, 76 years old. A devoted grandfather, he loved nothing more than playing chess with his grandson each morning. But one day, as he reached for his knight, his hand froze. He tried to move it, but it remained limp. His grandson asked, "Grandpa, are you okay?" But Joseph could not answer. His face drooped, his speech slurred, and he collapsed across the chessboard. By the time paramedics arrived, his brain had already lost too much oxygen. He survived, but his life changed forever. No more chess, no more long walks, no more independence. His morning coffee, 2 large mugs every day, had played its silent role in priming his body for this catastrophe. The heartbreak of these stories is not just in the suffering of the patient, but in the ripple effect it sends through families. Children suddenly become caregivers. Spouses lose their partner's companionship. Grandchildren grow up without the stories, the laughter, the wisdom that should have been passed down. A single clot robs not just one person, but an entire family. And yet, seniors continue to dismiss the warnings. They say, "It won't happen to me," or "I've been fine so far." But I must tell you the truth. Every senior who ended up on my operating table once said the same. Every patient who lost their speech, who now lives in a nursing home, once believed they were the exception. They all thought they were safe until the day they were not. This is why I speak so urgently, because I know how deceptive routine can be. The very thing you do every morning, the ritual that feels comforting and familiar, may be the blade hanging silently above your head. And the scariest part? You won't know it until it falls. Some people ask me, "Doctor, is 1 cup really that dangerous?" And I answer with what I have seen with my own eyes. Yes. For some seniors, 1 cup is enough. It depends on your arteries, your blood pressure, your hydration, your hidden risks. But the problem is, you don't know until it's too late. You cannot see inside your brain to watch the clot form. You cannot hear the vessels straining under pressure. You cannot feel the blood thickening until suddenly you collapse to the floor. As a doctor, I carry with me the memory of faces frozen mid-smile, voices silenced mid-sentence, lives split into before and after, all tied to what seemed like an ordinary morning. That is why I cannot stay silent. That is why I am telling you now, as clearly as I can. Your morning coffee is not harmless. For a senior brain, it is a loaded weapon. And once it fires, there is no undoing the damage. There is something I wish every senior could witness: the silence in a hospital room after a stroke has struck. The machines hum, the monitors beep, But the person lying in the bed can no longer speak, no longer move, no longer live as they once did. I stand at their side, looking at the face of someone who only hours earlier was laughing at breakfast or walking to the mailbox, and I think, this did not have to happen. This was preventable. And far too often, I trace it back to that morning ritual, that steaming cup of coffee swallowed without a second thought. You see, clots do not just form out of nowhere. They are fed by triggers. For seniors, coffee in the morning is one of the most potent triggers there is. Why? Because it strikes at your body's weakest moment. Overnight, as you sleep, your body becomes mildly dehydrated. Your blood thickens. Your vessels, already stiff from age, constrict in the cool morning hours. Your heart, preparing you to wake, pumps harder. Then, instead of giving your system water, the lifeline it craves, you pour in a liquid that dries you out further, squeezes your vessels tighter, and jolts your heart into overdrive. That is like stepping on the gas of a car with worn-out brakes and bald tires. Disaster is only a matter of time. I will never forget Henry, 80 years old, a retired mechanic. His daughter told me he was the kind of man who never missed his coffee. He called it his engine starter. One morning, as he sipped his second cup, he suddenly dropped the mug. Hot liquid splashed across the table, but Henry didn't even flinch. His arm dangled uselessly by his side, his eyes glazed over. By the time paramedics arrived, the clot had already stolen half his brain. Henry survived, but he could no longer recognize his daughter's face. The man who once repaired engines with steady hands could no longer lift a spoon to his mouth. What coffee does in the senior body is insidious. It tricks you. You feel awake, alert, ready to face the day. But beneath the surface, your vessels are under siege. The caffeine is tightening them, making them narrow like clogged pipes under pressure. The dehydration is thickening your blood, turning it into sludge. And the stress hormones rushing through your system are agitating your platelets, making them stickier, more eager to form clots. It feels good on the outside but is deadly on the inside. And it's not just the brain that suffers. The same clots that block brain arteries can form in the heart, triggering sudden heart failure. They can lodge in the lungs, causing a pulmonary embolism, a condition where you suddenly cannot breathe, collapsing within minutes. I have seen seniors brought into the ER gasping for air, their lips turning blue, their families screaming their names, all because of a clot that formed after their morning drink. The cruel reality is that coffee does not just increase the risk. It multiplies it in a body already teetering on the edge. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, atrial fibrillation. These are common in seniors. Each one alone raises the risk of clots. Together, they make your brain a minefield. And into that minefield, you toss the grenade of morning coffee. Let me share the story of Margaret, 66 years old. She thought she was healthy, just a little high blood pressure, as she put it. She took her medication faithfully and believed she was doing everything right. But she also drank 3 cups of coffee every morning, claiming it helped her get going. One morning, as she folded laundry, her right leg buckled and she collapsed. She couldn't move, couldn't call for help. Hours later, when her neighbor checked on her, she was lying on the floor, her face slack, her speech gone. The clot had done its damage. Her blood pressure medication had not protected her, because coffee had spiked her pressure beyond what the pill could control. This is the hidden danger. Medications cannot fully counteract the sudden surge coffee creates. You may believe your pills protect you, but coffee overpowers them, tipping your body into crisis before you even realize it. And what about those who say, "I drink coffee with food, so I'm safe"? I must warn you, even with food, the risks remain. The caffeine still enters your blood, the vessels still constrict, the dehydration still worsens. Food may slow the process slightly, but it does not erase the danger. I have treated seniors who had their morning coffee with toast, with eggs, with oatmeal, and still arrived in my ER with clots suffocating their brains. The saddest words I hear are, "Doctor, I thought it was normal." Stroke is not normal aging. Clots are not normal aging. Losing speech, losing movement, losing your mind. These are not the inevitable price of growing old. They are preventable outcomes of choices made each day. And coffee is one of the most dangerous choices a senior can make in the morning. Every time I walk past a cafe in the early hours and see seniors sipping from their mugs, laughing with friends, I feel a knot in my chest. Because I know that some of them, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, will collapse from the very drink in their hands. Their laughter will turn to silence. Their independence will vanish. And their families will ask me, "Doctor, why didn't anyone tell us?" I am telling you now. Coffee is not your friend, not after 60. It is an enemy disguised as comfort. And if you ignore this warning, you may pay the price with your speech, your mobility, even your life. 1 cup, 1 morning, 1 clot. That is all it takes. The most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. And one of the most deadly lies seniors repeat is this: "It's just a cup of coffee. How harmful can it be?" That small phrase has destroyed more lives than most realize. Because when you are over 60, there is no such thing as just a cup of coffee. Every sip carries consequences your brain cannot afford. Let me strip away the illusions and show you exactly what happens inside your body. You wake in the morning, and your blood is already thicker than usual. Why? Because you have gone 6, 8, even 10 hours without water. That means less fluid, more concentration of red cells, more sluggish flow. Your heart is pumping harder to push this heavy blood through narrow, stiffened vessels. Then, instead of giving your body water, the very thing it desperately needs, you flood it with coffee. Within minutes, caffeine is absorbed into your bloodstream. Adrenaline surges. Your heart beats faster. Your blood pressure spikes like a sudden storm. Your vessels clamp down, narrowing their already fragile passageways. And as this happens, your kidneys flush out even more fluid, dehydrating you further. What started as thick blood becomes even stickier, even slower, even more dangerous. This is the perfect breeding ground for a clot. Platelets, the sticky fragments that patch wounds, begin to cling together more eagerly under stress. Instead of flowing freely, they start forming little clusters. In a younger body, these clusters might be harmless. But in a senior's brain, where vessel walls are scarred, narrowed, and brittle, one of these clusters can lodge like a cork in a bottle. And the moment it does, blood supply to a section of your brain is cut off. The brain does not forgive such insults. Within 5 minutes of lost circulation, brain cells begin to suffocate. After 15 minutes, damage becomes irreversible. After an hour, entire regions of your brain may be gone forever. The function they controlled, speech, memory, movement, vision, is wiped out. And all of it began with what seemed like an ordinary morning drink. You may have heard people say coffee contains antioxidants, that it may lower the risk of certain conditions. But for seniors, this is a dangerous half-truth. Antioxidants mean little when your vessels are stiff as pipes and your blood flows like tar. The caffeine's tightening grip, the dehydration, the stress hormones, these effects outweigh any minor benefit. In fact, what may be helpful at 30 can be catastrophic at 70. The context of age changes everything. And let us not forget, coffee is not just caffeine. It contains compounds that raise cholesterol, worsening the buildup of plaque in your arteries. It irritates the lining of blood vessels, making them inflamed, stickier, more prone to clotting. Over years, this accelerates the narrowing of arteries, priming you for a sudden blockage. When you combine this with the natural aging process, you are standing on a cliff edge every morning without realizing it. Some seniors believe they are safe because they drink only one small cup. But even a single dose is enough to trigger vessel constriction and dehydration. Others believe switching to decaf protects them. But decaf still contains caffeine, still dehydrates, still irritates arteries. It may be less potent, but it is not harmless. The risk remains, especially when combined with other conditions like high blood pressure or diabetes. The morning is already the most dangerous time for your heart and brain. More strokes and heart attacks occur between 6 and noon than any other time of day. This is not coincidence. It is biology. Your body naturally releases stress hormones at dawn. Your blood pressure rises. Your vessels constrict. Coffee poured onto this fire is like gasoline on dry wood. It does not just add to the risk. It multiplies it. Now, picture this reality clearly. Your blood is already thick, your pressure already high, your vessels already tight. You drink coffee, and within minutes, the risk of clotting surges. You stand, you walk, you go about your day, and inside your brain, one small vessel gives way. You collapse, and everything you knew, everything you loved, is stolen from you in an instant. This is not alarmism. This is physiology. I have spent decades studying the brain, watching scans of clots bloom inside arteries like sudden storms, watching families crumble as their loved one slips away. And time and again, I see the same pattern. The morning hours, the fragile vessels, the blood thickened by coffee. When I say coffee can create deadly clots in a senior's brain, I do not mean eventually or hypothetically. I mean today, tomorrow, the next cup. That is the reality of how fast it can happen. You may drink coffee for years without an incident, but the damage builds silently, and the clot may strike suddenly, without warning. It only takes one. The brain does not give second chances. Once a clot forms and blood flow is blocked, there is no miracle cure, no reversal, no reset. Medicine can try to dissolve clots if caught early, but the window is short, and the outcomes are rarely perfect. Even the best-case scenario often leaves lasting scars: weakness, slurred speech, memory loss. The worst-case scenario is sudden death before help even arrives. So I must tell you in the clearest words possible, if you are over 60, coffee is not a harmless ritual. It is a direct threat to your brain's survival. The truth about coffee and the senior brain is not whispered in medical journals. It is shouted in the statistics. Stroke remains one of the leading killers of older adults worldwide. Blood clots are the culprit in nearly 9 out of 10 strokes. And what few dare to say out loud is that the very drink so many seniors rely on each morning is a powerful accelerator of this deadly process. Look closely at what coffee does to the circulatory system of a senior. First, dehydration. Coffee acts as a diuretic, forcing your kidneys to expel more fluid than you take in. When your body is already parched from hours of sleep, this pushes your blood into a dangerous thickness. Thick blood moves sluggishly, swirling in arteries instead of gliding smoothly. Sluggish flow is the perfect breeding ground for clots. Second, constriction. Caffeine does not simply stimulate alertness, it literally squeezes your blood vessels. Imagine a garden hose with water flowing through it. Now imagine pinching that hose halfway shut. Pressure rises behind the pinch. Turbulence increases, and the walls strain against the force. That is what happens inside your brain's vessels every morning when caffeine surges through. Narrower passages, higher pressure, greater chance of rupture or blockage. Third, agitation. Coffee stimulates the release of adrenaline and cortisol, your body's fight-or-flight hormones. These chemicals are meant for emergencies, not for daily breakfast rituals. They whip your heart into a faster rhythm, spike your blood pressure even higher, and make your platelets hyperactive. Sticky platelets clump together eagerly, and in a senior brain, that stickiness is often the final step before a clot takes hold. And fourth, inflammation. Coffee's oils and acids irritate the lining of your arteries. Over time, this weakens the smooth inner surface, turning it rough and scarred. A rough vessel wall is like sandpaper inside your brain's highways. When blood cells pass over it, they catch, they stick, and they pile up. What begins as a microscopic snag can quickly snowball into a dam blocking the river of life to your neurons. You may not feel any of this happening. That is the deception. You may feel more alert, more focused, even energized. But the danger is invisible, unfolding silently inside the most delicate organ you possess. You will not feel the clot forming until it is too late. And when it strikes, it does not give you time to prepare. This is why so many seniors are blindsided. They drink their coffee in the morning, head out for a walk, and suddenly stumble, unable to move their leg. They read the newspaper, then drop it as their hand goes numb. They begin a conversation, only to find their words tangled in their mouth. These are not coincidences. These are the fingerprints of coffee-triggered clots. The morning itself is already stacked against you. Blood pressure peaks at dawn. Stress hormones rise naturally. Your vessels are at their narrowest. Add coffee to that volatile state, and you create a perfect storm. That is why strokes and heart attacks cluster so heavily in the early hours. It is not random. It is biology, and coffee is gasoline poured directly on the fire. Even one cup can matter. Seniors often argue that moderation is safe. But moderation means nothing to a clot. A single blockage in the wrong artery can destroy your speech forever. A single clot in a critical vessel can erase your ability to walk. A single obstruction can silence you permanently before anyone has time to call for help. And for those who think decaf is a safe compromise, let me be clear, it is not. Decaf still carries caffeine, still dehydrates, still irritates your arteries. It may reduce the surge slightly, but the threat remains. In the brain of a senior already walking on a knife's edge, even less risk is still unacceptable risk. The longer you drink coffee as a senior, the greater the damage accumulates. Each day of dehydration, each morning of vessel constriction, each surge of adrenaline chips away at your resilience. Plaque builds. Arteries stiffen. Blood grows stickier. You may think you are fine, but the system is quietly deteriorating beneath the surface. Then one day, the pressure, the stickiness, the narrowing all align. The clot forms, and life is divided forever into before and after. The reality is brutal. The senior brain does not tolerate insults. Neurons do not regenerate once they die. A heart attack can sometimes be survived with medication, stents, or surgery. But a brain attack, a stroke, leaves scars that no surgeon can cut away. That is why prevention is the only weapon you have. And prevention demands that you stop feeding your body the very liquid that multiplies the risk of clot formation each morning. You may believe you need coffee to function. That without it, you will feel sluggish, unmotivated, even foggy. But that fog is survivable. A stroke is not. A morning of low energy is recoverable. A morning of paralysis is not. The choice is not between feeling tired and feeling alert. It is between protecting your brain and gambling with it. Understand this clearly. Coffee is not a harmless comfort. For a senior brain, it is a loaded weapon aimed at the arteries that keep you alive. Every morning you drink it, you are pulling the trigger. There comes a moment when you must face the truth, without excuses. And the truth is this: for seniors, coffee is not simply a drink. It is a trigger for clots, for strokes, for sudden death. Every cup poured each morning is a gamble, and the odds are stacked against you once you pass 60. Think of your brain as a city alive with lights, billions of neurons firing, streets buzzing with signals, memories stored like precious treasures. The blood vessels are the highways feeding this city with oxygen. Now imagine one truck jackknifing across a highway, blocking it completely. Traffic snarls. The lights in one district flicker and go out. Then another. Then another. This is what a clot does inside your brain. Coffee increases the chance that one of those trucks will crash. And once it does, the city never fully lights up again. Medical science is clear. The factors coffee unleashes: dehydration, constriction, pressure spikes, inflammation, platelet stickiness, are the very mechanisms that create clots. None of this is speculation. It is established biology, observed in every hospital, proven in every emergency room. And when you combine these effects with the vulnerabilities of age, stiff vessels, slower circulation, hidden plaques, the outcome is not just possible, it is inevitable. Understand the scale of what is at stake. Stroke is not a small inconvenience. It is not a scare. It is the #1 cause of disability in older adults, stripping away independence overnight. It robs speech, mobility, memory, the ability to swallow, even the ability to recognize your own family. For some, it robs life itself before help even arrives. And what fuels so many of these tragedies? A morning habit considered normal. The deception of coffee lies in its immediate effect. It feels good. It feels energizing. It gives the illusion of strength. But beneath that false energy, your arteries are being strangled, your blood is being thickened, your platelets are being weaponized. It is not energy you are drinking. It is the erosion of your brain's safety. You may hear people boast about how coffee helps longevity, how studies show it lowers risks in younger populations. Do not be misled. Those numbers are not about you. They are not about the senior body, already fragile, already tilted toward clotting. What is harmless or even helpful at 30 can be deadly at 70. The body changes, the risks change, and the cost of ignorance becomes catastrophic. The question is not whether coffee can hurt you. The question is how long you can continue before it does. Every morning, cup is a roll of the dice. Some seniors drink it for years without incident, and then one day collapse at the breakfast table. Others experience warning signs, dizziness, numbness, slurred speech, but dismiss them as just aging until the massive stroke arrives. And many never see it coming at all. When a clot forms in your brain, time is measured in minutes. Millions of neurons die every 60 seconds. No doctor, no drug, no surgery can bring them back. We can attempt to reopen the blocked artery, but even the best outcome leaves scars. Prevention is the only real defense, and prevention demands the courage to abandon the habits that endanger you, no matter how comforting they feel. Coffee is not worth the risk, not when the price is your speech, your mobility, your memory, your life, not when the very first sip each morning can tilt your body toward disaster. You do not need it. You do not benefit from it. What you need is water, hydration, circulation, nourishment, not a chemical jolt that weaponizes your own blood against you. So I must say it plainly, as a doctor who has watched too many seniors lose everything. If you are over 60, put down the coffee. Do not pour another cup. Do not believe another comforting lie about its benefits. Your brain deserves better. Your heart deserves better. Your family deserves better. Your brain is irreplaceable. Your life is irreplaceable. No momentary boost of energy is worth gambling them away. The choice is yours each morning. Life or risk, safety or danger, protection or destruction. Choose wisely, because one more cup may be the last one you ever drink.